This is the Caffeinated Risk Summer Show with your self-proclaimed grumpy security professionals, Tim McCreet and Doug Leese.
Welcome to our summer show, folks. This time we're going to keep it a little shorter because I don't know about where you are, but it's kind of hot where we are, which is unusual for Calgary. But
exactly.
But it's pretty damn hot. So, yeah, we'll be a little shorter, but trying to keep on point with some of the things we're just seeing going on right now in the news. But also, Calgary went back to work.
Yeah.
Right? So that's maybe something we want to dive into. So what does a post-pandemic look like when half your workforce is and isn't? And, well, what does this world look like now? So, and we're going to interview ourselves. So this should be interesting. I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
No, but you made it. It's a good point, right? Like I went back to work last week, and how do you start reconciling now that you're coming back into the workplace where you've been away? I've been away from an office for over a year. It's been almost a year and a half. And to come back into an office, one, it was awkward as hell, right? Because it's new.
Because you got to wear pants?
I got to wear pants. I'm actually wearing a tie and a shirt again. I'm like, holy smokes, I got to dress up for an office. And we staged it, right? We came back with portions of the team on Monday and then partway through the week, and now everyone's back as of this week. And it's interesting, right? So all of those things we worried about, all of the threats we tried to deal with when you were working from home, well, now you're back in the office. So what does that human element look like now? And, throw out a couple of good ransomware attacks, kind of a half-assed approach from Microsoft on patching a vulnerability, and welcome to our first week in the office, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For how many months now have we been not that concerned that somebody's plugging in a USB stick? They're not going to get that far. They're going to hit the VPN on the way in and, oh yeah, we're running the same EDR. Now
exactly.
And we're not naming a brand, just to be completely vendor agnostic. No, so you can log in and you can isolate that asset. So in theory, we can still do that once they're on the local network.
Right.
But I've been having some discussions with other people, and they're sort of asking, if it worked over VPN, why don't we have our users always VPN'd in?
Right.
So I always know where they're coming from instead of placing them literally right next to some of the very assets that I'm trying to protect. But, I've tried a number of times to get a data center behind a firewall and only allow in the allowed stuff. And it's never really worked. It's always broken. But I'm wondering if we started talking about management planes versus the regular interaction. When do you think your regular users that are, whether they're VPN'd in or back at the office, how many times did they ever really need to RDP into a server?
Oh, God. I mean, yeah.
Never.
Yeah, never.
So why do we allow that? If we have rules on those servers that say, unless you're coming from a management network, RDP just doesn't work for you. It's blocked. And you could say the same thing about SSH on Linux boxes or network switches and things like that. The networking teams are usually a little better at creating their own management enclaves and stuff like that.
Yep.
But how do you say higher up? It's going to cost this much money to work something out to make it defendable. Because I don't see any good reason that a regular user needs to sit at their desk and RDP to a domain controller or even a file server.
No, there isn't. I mean, this is the problem I have.
But they're set up that way
exactly
because trying to manage the firewall on a Windows host is a pain in the ass.
Well, and that's just it. I think we found that you're right. You nailed it, Doug. You're sitting at home, you VPN, and it's such a restricted path that we created for home users. And to recreate that now in the work environment, one, people get upset. Well, but what are you doing taking away some of this functionality? You never needed it in the first place. That was my first comment, right?
Yeah, you proved it for the last 18 months.
Pretty much, yeah. You were functioning from home, right beside your kitchen fridge, and you were just fine. Yet now you come in the office and you need to have this, and that was one of the points that kind of has been bugging me. And I've been talking to some other folks. The other one is, isn't this a great opportunity to really look at role-based access control?
Yeah.
And if you're a user in different parts of the organization, and as a user, you require to do these 3 or 4 tasks, then that's all you should be getting for access is those 3 or 4 tasks. Why are you being given the privilege of downloading files or executing files when you download them? Because that's what gets people in trouble. Like we've got, on the average company probably has 60 to 70% of the user base could get along just fine with a very restricted profile.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to need that 30 or 30 to 40% of people who are doing the support work or the admins or need access to some of the data themselves to do additional work, or they have requirements in different systems. But if you could get that 60% of the user base to a very restricted profile and it doesn't impact their performance, why are we not targeting that? Like, why are enterprises not targeting that approach to reduce the threats?
Yeah. And I think about the problem's always doing it at scale.
Yeah.
Like, how do you actually make sure that it's really that user, that's really that group? And I have seen multiple vendors try and do it by trolling Active Directory and then saying this is the user that's with that IP. And it worked great in the demos, but once you got it out in the fields, yeah, except when it's a jump server. And what if 6 people use that in the last half hour?
Yeah, fair enough.
But with the VPN software,
Mm-hmm.
you knew every single user because there was an active agent running on their machine.
Yeah.
So why don't we just leave it on? The minute you connect, I know exactly who you are. And if you move from that to Wi-Fi to this, to that, the other, then I don't care. You're still you. To me, that would get you into that 60, 70% world. They VPN in, they're just not going over the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just put some VPN endpoints right on your local network. And then you put all your stuff in behind it, just like as if. But it's going to be tricky. I think printing's going to be a pain.
Well, yeah, and don't get me wrong. I don't think this project, regardless of your company, isn't going to be for faint of heart.
No,
right? This is something where you're going to be putting in some serious effort, and you're going to have some executive support, because I can only imagine the amount of complaints you're going to get when you roll out even to that first test group, that proof of concept group. It's going to be, you are going to see some increased calls to your help desk, and you're not going to be invited to Christmas parties at the end of the year, right? That's a given. But the value, it's been bugging me this last probably 6 to 12 months that we created these isolated bubbles for everybody to sit in their home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did such a great job of, most companies did a great job early in the pandemic of getting everybody home, right? We're going to get you home, we're going to get you, and we're going to put in MFA, and you're going to have access via, your home network. We're going to give you a secure tunnel. And it worked. 95% of the time, folks I talked to when we first got into the work at home arrangements and the pandemic, there was a group of CISOs that I was talking to over the last year or so. And all of us were the same thing. Oh, this is great. It's working. We finally got everyone productive, terrific. And now, you and I are both going back to the office. Now all of a sudden we're right back into that same environment where we're on this flat LAN with access to all these different services. And I don't have the same mechanisms. I have less mechanisms now to get in and get access to those resources than I did before.
Yeah.
So does that create greater threats? Maybe, right? Maybe.
It's going to make it easier for the lateral propagation that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the buzzword of this year has been ransomware or supply chain compromise. But then when you mix those two together,
God.
Wow, now you got something. Microsoft just put through this good little blog on that. So this concept of humans getting in there, scoping out your environment. They know who can sign the check.
Oh, sure.
So they
do their homework, right?
They're going to encrypt that person's laptop. Oh,
yep.
How to get the attention, right? So if that level of sophistication is going on, then why do we think it's going to get better? It's got to get worse. And I think this Kaseya is like that. When you mix supply chain with ransomware, what do you get? A real big payday.
Yeah, you betcha. And that's why when there's I think what it was reported, $70 million was the number to release. It's what struck me, and actually you kind of laid it out really nice, Doug, because there's a parallel to what we were fighting. You and I were fighting way back, going back 80s and 90s when early toll fraud wars started, when we were losing billions every year in toll fraud, because for the longest time, if you go back when long distance actually meant something.
Same thing with cell. They had the same problem with cellular minutes, right?
Yeah, we went from, long distance services that were then, hijacked from somebody's switchboard, and then the social engineering to get the calls to flow through to 0, and then changing out voicemail boxes to 1 or, yes, so you could collect, get the collect calls going through. Prisoners figured that out as well. Bring in cell phone technology, cloning the cells, selling the clone, cells.
Yep.
The bills were getting horrific. And once they turned away from that and focused on everything internet based, now you're seeing this parallel to what the billions that we lost in toll fraud and cell phone fraud when they first came out. We're now seeing that starting to realize in ransomware, when the reported figure is in the hundreds of billions every year. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. If this is what they're telling you about, this is what they're gleaning off of veiled things in press releases, because of course I read the Colonial one really closely, obviously, because my day job's in pipelines right now.
Yep.
And you start looking at it, and I really was, rechecking that business model, because I've been following this since the early days, and it used to be, whatever, users will lose some pictures and you'll just get your backups, who cares? But that's changed. It's now a real thing. So even if you've got the best IT backups and the hygiene and the offline and all the rest, how are you going to deal with somebody getting a copy of your sensitive information and threatening to disclose it to, I don't know, the government or your customers or the world at large? And so if we look back to risk management now, because we can, there'll always be a way, and you should have run this or that. That doesn't matter.
Sure. Yep.
The game is elevating, and your data is the target. Or if you lose control of your data, what can happen? And I think that's where threat modeling is really where we got to get back to the business and say, what do we have here that would really hurt if it got into the wrong hands?
Yeah.
Start there.
Yep. Start there.
Because I think if we look at the model now, what's the worst that can happen? They get your stuff and then they tell the whole world because you refuse to give them money.
Yep.
What do we have that would hurt if that was the case?
Well, that's going to be the hard one, right? Is how, because the secondary question for that is, what's the hit to the reputation you can afford? Can you afford to lose some information? Well, what would that be? Can you afford to lose a little bit more? Well, that's going to hurt. Or what if these files, were released? The confidential sensitive stuff, the secret sauce, the intellectual property, the stuff that keeps your business running day to day. That's, to me, although it may not be meaningful to the majority of users on the internet, there are some folks who are going to be anxiously awaiting for your stuff to hit some paste bin file. And they're going to want to read it and go, wow, so that's how they did this. And that's to lose a competitive edge because of that, to lose market share because of that. I think when when we look at it from securities, the professional side, the risk professional side, that's when we really need to ask those questions in that intellectual property, that bucket that we have. If this was taken away, now what's the impact to the business?
Yeah. Right? And I think we have to be fully transparent about it. It's easy to say intellectual property, but if it's really only useful if you happen to have $12 billion worth of train tracks,
right,
and a yard full of trains, then it kind of narrows down who could use your information.
But if you're an IT consulting firm that supports a bunch of companies, that's a little different now, right? So that gets unique, right?
Way different. And that's where that Kaseya sort of tripped it up, right? Because who knows what all they were into.
Well, and that's what scared me when I read the little that I've had a chance to read over the last couple of days. And then to see that reported number, that $70 million number, that was, to me, that sets this massive precedent that others are going to start looking at. So the target now, you can imagine if it's successful, what's the bad guys competition within that environment going to look at the next, the next group that they're going to target going, if you got 70 from this group, what can I get from this group? Right.
Yeah. What's a $100 million score look like?
Yeah. And what would that have to look at? And what type of supply chain interruption am I going to have to hit to get $100 million price tag out of somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Well, your mind can spin pretty quickly what that would look like. And I'm sure somebody's already planning that one out, right?
Yep. Yeah. And they probably did that without subscribing to our podcast. They were probably already thinking about that. Glorious results of a misspent youth, is like, how do you think about those bad things? Well, let's just trust me. I think about how people would steal things, how they would,
yep.
And, I've run, some stores and been involved in a lot of different businesses over time. And there's always going to be some kind of theft situation.
Yep.
And now I think it's just moved to where the theft is not so much your computing resources. Because for a while, remember, they were trying to just steal your computer just to send out spam for Viagra and crazy stuff like that. And now, of course, computers and internet are rentable by the minute. So that doesn't work. That's useless now. But yeah, encrypting, disclosing, collecting. And I think we have to be careful differentiating between a commodity thing and the human assisted. And the guys that are writing this, like apparently ReEvil, or the guys behind this Kaseya, they're one of the top tier malware companies. So these guys that are making the malware don't even do the attacks. They just sell the kits. No.
It's a commodity for them. Like you said, you purchase from them what they've already built, and then you execute it against a client. So they're not involved in it, but they've programmed it for you, right?
Yeah, I'm selling guns. I'm not actually doing the crime.
Yeah, I didn't pull the trigger. I just gave them the gun, right? So
yeah, and until our laws catch up with something like that, it's illegal to make cyber weapons or something.
But I got to ask this though, because we've been doing this for like way, way too long. Do you, if you look back to when we started, where we were in our careers and where we are today, is everything getting more sinister? And like what I mean is that we've seen some just, go back to some of the early viruses that came out, or the stuff that would get caught on SneakerNet as I wandered from machine to machine with my floppy disk, and then then I went to USB keys, and now we're looking at stuff that's coming across through email or downloads. Do you think, like from your perspective, is it getting any more sinister? Like, it
seems to be.
Are they more sophisticated? Are they getting more? It's.
Well, I think there's both, right? I think it's more sinister in nature because before, it seemed to be that they would just be getting on, stealing cycles, maybe using your system to attack something else, but I can't say that I've ever lost any data or I've ever lost full use of the machine. And now, now you look at when the Russians came through and took out the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainian power. And, one of the last things on exit was to format all the drives on the way out using kill disk, I think it was. It doesn't matter, but it was destructive in nature. And the ransomware is destructive in nature, and they've just added the extortion thing. Yeah. But whether it's turning the lights out on your enemy or it's just for cash, it's very well thought through. And the fact that they've turned that into a business that they now turn around and resell, you don't have to know how to code. You just have to have an adversary in mind, or you have to have a victim in mind, and you got to figure out how to get this stuff into their world. But once you do, you just click this button here. And actually, in some cases, I've heard and I've never pursued this, so I don't know if it's true, they work on a commission. They'll take a cut of whatever you get. So when I think it was was it BitSite was the one I was looking at just before this interview. They're looking between 2018 and 2020, their data was saying they're seeing a 10 times increase.
Wow.
Well, it's always worked, but now it works even better.
Sure.
And when you look at the risk model for the people writing the software, it's very low risk.
Yeah.
Because they're not the ones that are going to get caught and go to jail.
No, absolutely. Right.
And now if you've got a loyalty model or a resale model and all those things on top, you just think, wow. You compare to some other criminal activities where it's very clear the law says you're not allowed to make drugs.
Yeah, you're going to jail if you get caught, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, whereas cyber weapons, I don't think there's really much on the books. So even if you did catch them, what are you going to get?
When you look at where we've come from before, so, you look at how we applied ESRM 20 years ago, a lot easier. You could explain the approach, even though most executive teams 20 years ago didn't want to hear it anyway. But you could at least explain the approach, and you had a better handle on the types of threats to the business objectives. Now it's the smart money is to, you never admit that you're never going to admit you're going to be a target, but it's smart to figure that you are going to be. Mm-hmm. Now it's the when and how long. Yep. As opposed to if and we're better than them. No, we're not anymore. I think now it's a matter of are you capable of detecting it quick enough, and you react fast enough to limit the exposure or limit the impact of the threat. That's the best we can do on a really good day. Right, on a really shitty day, you've got Colonial and JBS and our friends in the IT firm. That's now my sliding scale of a good day. Right?
Yeah. And maybe this is where we need to go. Maybe us as risk professionals, we start to push the organization into working through their response plans because, although I have hair, it's all completely white. Mostly, I want to blame some on my ex-wives and my children, but I think most of it is actually due to all the late nights and all the crazy IRs I've worked over the years. And, it's not stopping. I've done, I think, 4 real ones this year alone.
Wow.
Like, holy, it's like.
And it's only July, right? That's just frightening.
You don't want to say you don't want to say I'm getting too old for this stuff, because I think you're actually better the older you get because you've seen it all once or twice before. But it's more of, I'm getting tired of the same old. Seeing it there. What did they get? How far have they gotten? Like the standard containment, triaging, scoping. But at my day job, I'm fortunate right now that there is a fellow that is ex-military, and he and I are pretty lockstep with a lot of the threat modeling and stuff. Mm-hmm. Tabletops are good, but I think when you're really going to test your IR plans is you keep notes on the incidents you are working and pull those out at random and just walk your plan and go, where did we follow? Where did we stop? And you're going to learn a lot more about yourself then.
Yep.
You really got to look at your incidents and see how you did, and not the next day. And definitely the first few times, not with the VP in the room and stuff like that. It's like the guys that know what to do sit down and they go through it and they go, yeah, we should probably fix it. Yeah, that's taken way too long to do that. We should fix it. In fact, why are we even doing that step? Because that's kind of stupid. They already left. Why don't we just put that on an automated train somewhere and, it sort of does its thing, but I'm not taking a person off the hunting to look for more evidence just to go block a couple things in the firewall.
Right.
I'll get a script to add to the firewall rule, we've got some good tools now. 10 years ago, you wouldn't trust a script to update your firewall, but now I think you can. Now I think it works pretty well. A lot of these SOAR tools are pretty good.
I agree. And I think you hit on some really good points. I just wanted to, especially for the folks listening, and this we keep going back to the ESRM model and what those sections or what those distinct characteristics of that model really bring. There's a couple of good ones. One, that whole principle of continuous improvement, right? There is within the model, there's that whole process for us as professionals to continually improve. And that's, you kind of nailed it, Doug, as a portion of that was we need to do that exercise of bringing back the incidents that we had, looking at them. And I've done it, and I know you and I both done this, where we take the whiteboard when we do the review and we time limit like a CSI incident, and we go from start to finish. And it's the distinct points on the timeline is where we need to stop and focus on the notes we took and the actions we did and ask the questions and be honest with the answers. Why did you do this? Or did you think of this instead? And that leads to the last part where inside that inner loop with the ESRM diagram is this idea of always monitoring and analyzing. And that's where what we learn from those exercises, you have to take that information that you've got from those detailed sessions where you're being really objective and honest with your the points you went through for the incident response, and now take those learnings, document them, and put them back inside your monitoring approach so that, just to your point earlier, if you saw this and you acted this way and it was able to detect it faster or sooner or reduce the risk, that now becomes your new SOP.
Yep.
Document that, put it in, and that becomes your new monitoring approach. Is that this is already tried and tested on incident number 210. We're taking it now and it's in our SOP. And now you test that for this point moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good summer and get a chance to take a few days off. I know you just started a new job, but...
Yeah, I get a chance to get some time away, and I've got 2 road trips coming up for ESRM. I get to go down to Florida for our ASA's general meeting, which is the GSX, or our Global Security Exchange. And I've been invited to Belgrade, Serbia, to present a 2-day workshop with Rochelle Lawyer on ESRM in October.
Wow, that's...
Yeah.
So those that are listening, it's like, these are the guys that originally started this. You don't get any closer to ground zero. So tune in next time.
Exactly. Yeah, tune in next time.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the latest podcast from Caffeinated Risk. Make sure you visit our website, caffeinatedrisk.com, to stay up to date on what we've been working on. Our website has bios of our podcast guests, posts about topics we're passionate about, and even a library reference material we find valuable in the work we do every day. And don't forget to subscribe to Caffeinated Risk on your favorite podcast service. This way, you'll be notified when we release our next podcast, and you can listen to our previous guests just in case you missed them. Thanks so much for listening to Caffeinated Risk.